justice. With us now is the Congressman Bera, who's a Democrat out of California, sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, also a medical doctor, and we welcome you, Congressman. So let's start with that. Medicaid. You heard the president, and he seems to realize the politics of this. He says, only waste, fraud, and abuse, don't make cuts. What's your concern?
Well, Connell, thanks for having me on. My concern is the Congressional Budget Office is a nonpartisan office, so it's not Democratic or Republican. And if they're saying $700 billion in cuts, that's a lot of people that are going to lose health care. And I think that's why they're having trouble finding the votes to pass this bill.
Okay, let me talk. It's interesting to get your perspective on this because, as I said earlier, the perspective that matters in terms of votes is just the Republicans. They're fighting amongst themselves, and they're either going to pass it or they're not. But the hardliners, as we keep describing them, the people who want to see more cut, are the likes of kind of like a Chip Roy, Congressman Chip Roy. Let me play a clip of what he says on Medicaid, and then we'll compare and contrast about what someone like you thinks. Here's Congressman Roy.
One of the reasons I ran for Congress was to deal with our very badly broken healthcare system. Today, there are millions of Americans right now who can't get healthcare because of our broken system. They're on wait lists. The vulnerable Americans are on wait lists because we've got a broken system that rewards the able-bodied over the vulnerable, that gives more money to people on Medicaid than on Medicare. We are trying to fix those things and match those so we have a system that works.
This is just trying for a better system. What do you say?
So I'm a doctor. I've run health systems. I'm more than happy to work with Republicans to improve the efficiency of our system, get better outcomes, take some of the unnecessary waste and fraud out of the system. There's a lot that we could do there to get better health care, more affordable health care to every American. So if Chip Roy wants to work with me on that, that's great. This is not the way to go about doing it. Again, it should be done in a bipartisan way, so it isn't 2 years of Republican control, 2 years of Democratic control. We've got to do this for the long haul.
If you had to guess, and maybe you don't have an exact number, but how much do you think is in there? And everybody seems to agree there's always some in government programs, waste or fraud or abuse. The question is, how much can it move the needle? How much do you think's in there?
My guess, and I think the CBO probably estimates it to be about $40 to $50 billion that you might be able to get through efficiencies, waste, fraud, and abuse. In Medicare Advantage, some of the health plans have taken advantage. You've heard the president talk about that a little bit. Maybe that's another $50 billion. So there's places that you could go to improve the system, lower costs. The president's talked about pharmaceutical costs. Why do we pay more than every other country in the world? We could certainly do that in a bipartisan way.
Right. Yeah, that's something he has talked about. You're right. So what about the overall spending path of our country, though? Because, this is what the conservatives essentially are arguing and have been for years, to say our debt and deficits are a huge problem. And I think it's hard to kind of say that they're not, right? And the debt only grows larger, 36 trillion and counting. So how can we actually tackle that problem if we don't look at programs like Medicaid and other entitlement programs?
So now you've got to look at everything together, right? So you've got to raise revenue, which is uncomfortable for Republicans because that means you might be raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans, billionaires. And for Democrats, that means you might have to look at entitlement programs and where you can make changes there, maybe raising the retirement age on Social Security a little bit, which Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did to shore up Social Security. So there are things that you can do, but it's a Butch Cassidy Sundance Kid moment where you got to hold hands and jump off the cliff together.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.